r/AmItheAsshole I gave my husband an ultimatum after he chose his sister. Hashtag chunk 1, the breaking point. The words came out before I could stop them, cold and measured in a way that scared even me. It's her or me, Derek. You have 30 days to fix this, or I'm filing for divorce. My husband's face went pale, his fork clattering onto his plate. We were sitting at our kitchen table, the one we'd picked out together during happier times, when we actually ate meals as a couple instead of in the suffocating silence. The untouched Thai food between us was getting cold, just like everything else in our marriage. What? He whispered, as if he hadn't heard me clearly. As if the ultimatum I'd been building toward for 3 years hadn't just landed like a grenade on our dinner table. I didn't repeat myself. I couldn't. My hands were shaking too badly, and if I spoke again, I'd either start crying or start screaming, and neither option was going to help me right now. I needed him to understand that this wasn't anger talking. This was the sound of a woman who'd already made peace with burning everything down. Let me back up. I'm 29 years old, and until approximately 6 hours ago, I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with a man sitting across from me. We've been married 3 years. We've been together for 8. I know his coffee order, the way he hums off-key in the shower, and exactly how to make him laugh until he can't breathe. Or at least, I used to. What I didn't know, or more accurately, what I'd been refusing to acknowledge, was that somewhere along the way, I'd become an afterthought in my own marriage. The problems didn't start all at once. They were more like a slow erosion, the kind you don't notice until one day you realize the foundation is crumbling beneath you. It was small things at first. Derek canceling our weekly date nights because his sister Melissa needed his help. Derek spending our grocery budget on an emergency shopping trip for Melissa because she was going through something. Derek taking his sister's calls during our conversations, mid-sentence, like my words didn't matter. But they escalated. God, did they escalate. Last year, Derek canceled our anniversary dinner, our 3rd anniversary, because Melissa was moving to a new apartment and really needed the guys to help her. Not because she couldn't afford movers. Not because it was a genuine crisis. Because his sister didn't want to spend money on professional help. Derek left me alone on our anniversary, dressed up in a black dress I bought specifically for him to take off later, sitting at a reservation for 2 that I'd made 3 months in advance. He came home at midnight, sweaty and exhausted, surprised that I was angry. Then there was the savings account incident. We'd been saving for a down payment on a house, the house, actually. There's this beautiful Victorian on Maple Street that we've been driving by for 2 years, the one I've circled in listings and emailed him photos of at 2 in the morning when I couldn't sleep because I was so excited about our future. 3 months ago, Derek transferred $8,000 of our savings, almost a third of what we'd accumulated, to Melissa's account because she was having a fashion emergency. She wanted to start an online boutique and needed inventory. Derek did this without discussing it with me. I found out when I logged into our account to make a deposit. When I confronted him, he said it was a family emergency. When I asked if our future together was also a family emergency, he couldn't look me in the eye. The cherry on top of this shit sundae? Melissa had a key to our house. Not because Derek gave her one, he'd actually asked her permission first, or so I thought, but because he'd never asked me at all. I found out when I came home from work one Tuesday and she was sitting on our couch, eating yogurt directly from our container, watching Netflix on our TV. She'd let herself in. With a key my husband had apparently given her. For emergencies. Derek swore he'd meant to tell me. He swore it was just for emergencies. But over the next 2 months, I came home to find her there constantly. She'd use our shower. She'd eat our food. Once, I found her trying on clothes in our bedroom with her girlfriend, and they were literally standing on our bed to look in the mirror. I'd started to feel like a guest in my own home. But today was the final straw. 2 weeks ago, I had a miscarriage. It was early, only 9 weeks, and I hadn't even told most people yet. The loss had been devastating in a quiet way that only those who've experienced it can understand. That particular kind of grief that sits on your chest and makes it hard to breathe. I'd been following doctor's orders, rest, recovery, no strenuous activity. Derek had been supportive, or at least I thought so. But his sister had a birthday party today. Not a milestone birthday, she's turning 31. Not even a planned event, apparently it was thrown together last minute at a casual restaurant. Just something to celebrate her. Derek asked me if it was okay if he went. Of course, I'd said, because I didn't want to be the kind of wife who kept her husband from his family. Because I was still trying to be the cool, understanding spouse. Because I didn't yet know that I was asking him to choose, and I was about to find out exactly what he'd choose. He'd kissed my forehead, promised he'd be back early, told me to rest. He came home at 11 p.m., reeking of alcohol and birthday cake, talking about how funny Melissa had been tonight, how they'd all gone out for drinks after dinner, how he'd paid for a round. And something inside me just snapped. I realized, in that moment, that my miscarriage had rated lower on Derek's priority list than his sister's birthday party. That our marriage, our future, that Victorian house on Maple Street that I'd stopped looking at listings for because I'd stopped believing we'd ever get there, all of it was secondary to Melissa. I realized I was invisible in my own life. So we'd eaten Thai food in silence, and I'd waited until he was sitting down, defenseless across from me, before I said the words that changed everything. It's her or me, Derek. You have 30 days to fix this, or I'm filing for divorce. Now, looking at his pale face, I felt the weight of what I'd just done settle onto my shoulders. I meant every word. And that was the scariest part of all. Hashtag chunk 2, the fallout. Derek didn't speak for a long time. He just sat there, his jaw working silently like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. The Thai food continued its slow descent into congealed sadness between us. Finally, he pushed his chair back and stood up. Not in anger. If he'd been angry, maybe I could have handled it. Anger would have meant he was fighting for us. Instead, he looked confused. Gutted. Like I'd just told him his dog had died. You don't mean that, he said quietly. I do. Sarah, come on. You're upset. You're still recovering. You're not thinking clearly. There it was. The dismissal wrapped up in concern, the way he'd been doing it for years. Asterisk, you're too emotional. You're hormonal. You're not being rational, asterisk, as if my very legitimate grievance was just another female emotion to be managed and soothed away. I stood up too, because I wasn't going to sit there and let him loom over me while he explained why I was wrong about my own life. I've been thinking very clearly, Derek. For the first time in a long time, actually. I've been thinking about our marriage. I've been thinking about the fact that 2 weeks ago I miscarried our child, and today you went to your sister's birthday party. Not her wedding. Not an anniversary. A birthday party that was organized this morning. That's not fair. His voice rose slightly, a crack appearing in the controlled facade. You said it was okay. Because I didn't want to be selfish, I snapped. Because I've spent 3 years trying not to be the wife who complains about your sister. Do you know how insane that sounds? I shouldn't have to sacrifice my dignity and my marriage to avoid being labeled as selfish for wanting my husband to prioritize me during a medical crisis. Derek ran both hands through his hair, a gesture I'd seen 1,000 times before. His stress tick. Good. He should be stressed. He should be terrified. Okay, he said, and there was something almost pleading in his voice now. Okay, you're right. I should have been here today. I should have skipped it. But Sarah, giving me an ultimatum? Threatening divorce? That's not how we fix this. No? I moved toward the sink, needing to do something with my hands before they shook completely apart. What was I supposed to do, Derek? I've asked you nicely. I've expressed my feelings. I've cried. I begged. For 3 years, I've watched you choose her over me, and you've always acted like it wasn't a big deal. Like I was overreacting. So what, exactly, was the right move here? When he didn't answer, I continued, my voice steady now in a way that terrified me. This calm, measured version of myself was dangerous. This was the part of me that had already done the math and decided she could be happy alone. You have 30 days, I said. That's not arbitrary. That's enough time for you to really look at this situation, to understand what's happening, and to make actual changes. Real boundaries with Melissa. Not just apologizing to me and then falling back into old patterns the next time she calls with a crisis. And if I don't? Derek's voice was small. You'll really file for divorce? I turned to face him. Yes. The word hung in the air between us like a physical thing. You'd throw away 8 years? 3 years of marriage? Because of my sister? No, I said, and I meant it. I'd throw it away because you chose her. Because you've been choosing her. Because I asked you repeatedly to change, and you didn't. Because I deserve a partner, Derek, and right now, I have someone who treats me like an inconvenience. His phone buzzed. We both heard it. He glanced at it instinctively, and I saw his shoulders tense. If that's Melissa, I started. It's not, he said quickly. Too quickly. But he didn't check it. Don't lie to me. Don't protect her feelings right now. Check the phone. He picked it up with visible reluctance, and I watched his face as he read the screen. It was Melissa. Of course it was Melissa. She's asking if I can come pick her up tomorrow morning, Derek said slowly. She's had a fight with her girlfriend, and she wants to stay with us for a few days. I stared at him. Actually stared, waiting to see if he understood the irony. Waiting to see if my husband would realize that his sister was already testing the boundaries I just demanded he set. You can't, I said flatly. Tell her no. Sarah. No. This is it, Derek. This is the actual test. Not something that happens 30 days from now. This is the moment you decide if you want to stay in this marriage or not. Your sister is offering you the easy choice. She's giving you an escape hatch where you can comfort her and be the good brother. And I'm offering you the hard choice, where you tell her no and come sit down with me and actually have a conversation about what we need to do to fix us. Derek looked down at his phone like it was a loaded gun. His thumb hovered over the screen. The weight of it crashed down on me then, the realization that I was about to find out if I'd already lost him. If I'd somehow become so invisible that choosing me would feel like a betrayal to him, even now, even at this crossroads. I can't tell her no, Derek said quietly. Not right now. Not when she's having a hard time. Something in my chest cracked. Not broke, exactly. But cracked in a way that I knew would never fully heal. Okay, I whispered. What? Okay. You've given me your answer. You don't realize it yet. I walked past him toward our bedroom, the room where I'd once felt safe, where I'd once believed in our future. I could hear him calling after me, his voice distant and tinny as it filtered through the walls. I closed the door and locked it. Then I sat on our bed, on his side, and began making a list of divorce attorneys on my phone. 30 days. He'd had 30 days, and he'd failed before the sun had even set on day 1. I'd been prepared to blow up our marriage. I just hadn't realized he'd handed me the dynamite and a lighter already. Chunk 3, the waiting game. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed. For a moment, I let myself believe that Derek had slept on the couch out of guilt, that he was giving me space. Then I heard the sound of his car pulling out of the driveway, and I knew. He was going to get Melissa. I didn't get out of bed. I lay there in the morning light, listening to the house settle around me, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not the sharp pain of betrayal, I'd already processed that last night. This was duller, heavier. This was the feeling of watching something die in real time. My phone buzzed at 8:47 a.m. A text from Derek, *I'm picking up Melissa. She's really struggling right now. I know what you said, but I can't just abandon her. I'm sorry. We'll talk when I get back, *. I didn't respond. What was there to say? He'd made his choice, and he'd made it within 12 hours of my ultimatum. The fact that he thought he could soften it with an apology, with an explanation about Melissa's struggle, only proved my point. He wasn't willing to see this as a test. He was treating it as a negotiation, as if he could appease both of us simultaneously, as if my needs and his sister's needs were equivalent weights on a scale. I pulled myself out of bed because lying there felt like surrendering. I showered in scalding water, trying to wash away the numbness that had settled over me. My miscarriage recovery had been complicated, some bleeding, a follow-up appointment scheduled for next week, and I was moving carefully, aware of my own fragility. Ironic, I thought, that my body was more attuned to its own damage than my husband was. By noon, I'd scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. Her name was Patricia Chen, and her office was only 15 minutes away. The soonest she could see me was Wednesday. I booked it. Then I called my best friend, Ava. I hadn't told her everything yet. I'd been too raw, too uncertain if I was making a massive mistake. But now, with Derek physically absent and Melissa presumably heading toward my home, I needed to say it out loud to someone other than my husband. He's bringing her here today, I told Ava without preamble. After I told him not to. After I gave him an ultimatum. There was a pause. I could almost hear Ava's brain recalibrating. He's bringing Melissa to your house? Right now? Yes. She had a fight with her girlfriend. Apparently that's more important than the fact that his wife just asked him to choose. Sarah, that's... Ava trailed off, and I could hear the frustration building in her voice. That's really bad, right? Like, that's the bad choice? That's the bad choice, I confirmed. I told him he had 30 days. He failed in 12 hours. So what are you going to do? I looked around my bedroom, the space I'd shared with Derek for 3 years, the place where I'd imagined raising children, growing old, building a life. Now it felt like a hotel room. Temporary. Not mine. I have a consultation with a divorce attorney on Wednesday, I said. Ava let out a low whistle. You're serious about this? I was always serious about it. But knowing you're serious and actually doing it are different things, Ava said gently. Sarah, have you thought about what this actually looks like? You'll have to live in the same house as Derek while you're getting divorced. You'll have to split assets. There's going to be... this is going to get really messy and really painful. I know. Do you? Her voice had taken on that particular tone she used when she was trying to protect me from myself. Because this isn't like being angry at Derek for a week and then making up. This is actually ending your marriage. This is starting a legal process. This is... Ava, I interrupted gently. I know. Trust me, I've thought about it. I've thought about nothing else since last night. But I also know that if I don't do this now, I'm telling Derek that my ultimatum was empty. I'm telling him he can ignore me, choose his sister, and I'll eventually just accept it and move on. I can't do that. I can't live like that. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said finally. Okay. I'm with you. But we need to make a plan. You can't stay in that house with both of them. That's going to be toxic. I know. I haven't figured that part out yet. Come stay with me, Ava said immediately. Tonight. Pack a bag and come stay with me. You need space, and Derek needs to understand that this is real. I'd been so focused on the legal mechanics of divorce that I hadn't considered the physical logistics. Where would I go? I didn't have family. My parents had died 2 years ago in a car accident, and I'd never been close to my extended family. Ava was my person. Ava had been my rock through that grief, through the marriage struggles, through the miscarriage. Yeah, I said, and my voice cracked slightly. Okay. Yeah, I'll come stay with you. Tonight, Ava confirmed. Pack what you need. Take important documents if you have them. Important documents. Right. I'd need to gather financial records, our marriage certificate, anything that would help the divorce process move forward. The thought made my stomach twist. After I hung up with Ava, I heard Derek's car pull back into the driveway. I listened from my bedroom as he and Melissa came inside, their voices filtering up through the house. Melissa was already crying, performing her distress for Derek's benefit. I could hear her explaining about her girlfriend, about how unfair everyone was being, about how she had nowhere else to go. Derek's voice was soft, reassuring. The voice he used to use with me. I stood up, pulled a suitcase from the back of my closet, and began to pack. Clothes, toiletries, laptop, important files. Everything I might need to start the process of unraveling the life I built with Derek. I was zipping the suitcase when there was a knock on the bedroom door. Sarah? Derek's voice came through the wood. Can we talk? I didn't answer. I just shouldered the suitcase, opened the door, and looked at him standing there with Melissa hovering behind him in the hallway, her eyes red and theatrical. I'm leaving, I said quietly. I'm going to stay with Ava for a while. I have a consultation with a divorce attorney on Wednesday. I watched the words hit him like physical blows. The color drained from his face. Melissa's crying stopped abruptly. You're really doing this, Derek whispered. You're really doing this, I corrected, and I walked past both of them toward the stairs. Chunk 4, The Reckoning. The drive to Ava's apartment felt like crossing a threshold I couldn't come back from. I kept my hands steady on the wheel, kept my eyes on the road, kept my breathing measured. If I let myself think about what I was actually doing, leaving my husband, filing for divorce, walking away from 3 years of marriage, I was going to fall apart, and I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not yet. Ava met me at her door with a glass of wine and a fierce hug. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with the kind of lived-in comfort that my own house had somehow stopped having. I sat on her couch while she bustled around, making me tea, ordering Thai food, doing all the things people do when they're trying to fill silence with purpose. Talk to me, she said, settling beside me with her own wine. Tell me what you're feeling. Numb, I said honestly. I feel like I'm watching someone else's life fall apart. Like I'm narrating it in third person. That's shock, Ava said. That'll pass. Will it? She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she reached over and squeezed my hand. You did the right thing, she said finally. Whatever happens next, you did the right thing by leaving. My phone buzzed. Then again. And again. Derek. Sarah, please come home. We can figure this out, don't do this. Don't make a rash decision, I love you. That has to count for something, I turned the phone face down on the couch and didn't respond. By 9 p.m., he was calling. I sent it to voicemail. He called again. And again. Eventually, I turned the phone off entirely and felt something close to relief at the silence. Wednesday morning came with a knot of anxiety sitting in my chest. The consultation with Patricia Chen was at 10 a.m., and I spent the first hour of the day in Ava's guest room, trying to stop my hands from shaking. I'd gathered all the documents I could find, bank statements, the mortgage paperwork, our marriage certificate, medical records from the miscarriage. The physical evidence of our life together, reduced to a manila folder. Patricia Chan's office was exactly what I expected, expensive and efficient. She was in her 50s, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog everything about me in the first 30 seconds. Walk me through the marriage, she said, pulling out a legal pad. So I did. I told her about Derek's constant prioritization of his sister. About the money. About the final betrayal, him choosing to be with Melissa instead of staying home with me during my recovery. About the ultimatum. About him failing within 12 hours. She didn't interrupt, didn't gasp, didn't make faces. She just took notes in a neat, precise hand. How long have you been married? She asked when I'd finished. 3 years. And you have no children? No. The word came out smaller than I intended. I just had a miscarriage, actually. Last week. Her expression shifted slightly, not sympathy exactly, but a recognition of relevance. That will matter in terms of demonstrating emotional abandonment during a vulnerable time. It strengthens your position. I thought of myself as a woman with a miscarriage. Patricia thought of me as a legal position. The distinction felt important. What are you hoping to achieve? She asked. I hadn't really let myself think about that. I'd been so focused on the escape, leaving, filing, making it real, that I hadn't considered what I actually wanted out of this. I want him to understand that his choices have consequences, I said slowly. But I also know that's not how divorce works. Divorce isn't about understanding. It's about dividing assets and moving on. Exactly, Patricia said. So let me ask again, what are you hoping to achieve? I thought about my house. My beautiful house that Melissa treated like a second home, traipsing through it like she owned half of it. The house Derek and I had bought together, had painted together, had made plans for together. I want the house, I said. Patricia made a note. And Derek's position on the house? He loves it. His sister loves it. They'd probably fight me on it. All right. In a 3-year marriage with no children, the house will likely be divided as community property. You might argue for it as your primary residence, especially given the emotional toll of the situation, but there's no guarantee. He could argue for equal value in other assets, the investment accounts, the car, whatever else is in your shared name. My stomach sank. Of course he could. Of course nothing would be simple. What else? Patricia asked. I want to be done with him, I admitted. I want to not see him every day. I want to not hear him explain why his sister is more important than I am. I want to actually breathe. Divorce will accomplish that, Patricia said. But it's going to take time. Typically 6 to 12 months in this state, depending on how contentious things get. And if there's property dispute, it could take longer. 12 months. The number felt impossible. 12 months of living with the fallout, of seeing Derek, of the slow dissolution of everything I'd built. There's something else, I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. His sister has a key to our house. And she stays there without permission. Would that matter? Patricia's pen paused. That's trespassing, she said thoughtfully. If you're changing the locks before he can claim she has implied permission to be there, that could be a smart move. Prevents him from claiming you're keeping him from necessary familial contact. The idea of changing the locks felt both empowering and terrifying. It felt like erasing him from the house we'd shared. Can you do that? I asked. You can do that, Patricia corrected. If the house is in both your names and you're both currently living there, it's technically still his residence, which complicates things. But if you file for divorce and request primary residence, you strengthen that argument. By the time I left her office, I had a folder of paperwork and a 3-page action plan. File the divorce petition by end of week. Change the locks, after consulting with her on the legal language to include in the filing. Separate finances. Document all instances of emotional abandonment and financial irresponsibility. It was all so clinical. So logical. I sat in my car in the parking lot and called Derek. He answered on the first ring, like he'd been holding the phone, waiting. Sarah, thank God. Where are you? When are you coming home? I'm filing for divorce, I said flatly. I wanted to tell you before the paperwork arrives. I'm not trying to ambush you. Sarah, no. No, we can work this out. I'll talk to Melissa. I'll set boundaries. I'll do whatever you want. Please don't do this. You had 30 days, I said. You chose not to use it. This is what happens. I love you. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. That was almost the worst part. I believed that he loved me. He just didn't love me enough. But loving someone isn't enough if you won't fight for them. And you won't fight for me. You chose Melissa. I hung up before he could respond, and I didn't turn my phone back on for 2 hours. #chunk 5. The first complication came on Thursday morning. I was sitting at Ava's kitchen table with my laptop open, trying to organize the financial documents Patricia had asked me to compile, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. Is this Sarah Mitchell? A woman's voice, professional and clipped. Yes? This is Linda Hartwell with Bright Futures Accounting. I'm calling regarding your joint account with Derek Mitchell. There's been some unusual activity, and we wanted to confirm authorization before processing. My stomach tightened. What kind of activity? A withdrawal request for $15,000, submitted this morning. The request came from your husband's email, but given that the account is joint, we wanted to verify with both parties before. Don't process it, I said immediately. That withdrawal is not authorized by me. There was a pause. I could almost hear her typing. I see. That's what I suspected when I saw the account history. There have been several large transfers over the past year, all initiated by the primary account holder, which appears to be your husband. I wanted to flag that for you given the nature of the withdrawal request. After I hung up with Linda, I sat very still. $15,000. In one withdrawal. The savings account Derek and I had built together over 3 years, the one he'd already dipped into multiple times for Melissa's emergencies, was apparently about to be gutted. He was trying to hide assets. Or maybe he wasn't even thinking about it as hiding. Maybe he was just panicking, trying to move money around before the divorce paperwork made it official. The thought made me feel sick and angry in equal measure. I called Patricia immediately. "You need to file today," she said without preamble. "Not end of week. Today. Once the divorce petition is filed, any assets he tries to move become part of the discovery process. Right now, he can technically do what he wants with a joint account. He wouldn't." I started, then stopped. "Actually, he would. He's already done it. Then we file today. I'm sending you the petition forms now. Sign them electronically, get them back to me, and I'll file with the court this afternoon. Can you do that?" I could. I did. By 2 p.m., the forms were signed and submitted. By 4 p.m., Patricia had filed the petition with the court. It was real. Official. Irreversible. Derek found out at 5:47 p.m. when he got the notice. He showed up at Ava's apartment at 6:15. I heard his car pull up from where I was sitting on her couch, pretending to watch television. The knock came hard and fast, not angry exactly, but urgent. Ava looked at me. "You don't have to answer it," she said. But I did. I got up and went to the door, and when I opened it, Derek looked like a man who'd been hit by a truck and was still processing the impact. His hair was disheveled. He was still in his work clothes. His eyes were red. "You filed," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes. Sarah, you can't just, we were supposed to talk about this. We were supposed to try. I gave you 30 days, I said." My voice sounded steadier than I felt. "You didn't use it. You tried to move $15,000 out of our savings account instead." His face went white. "What?" "No, I was going to pay for." "For what?" "For Melissa? Again? For a marriage counselor." He raised his voice, and I heard Ava shift behind me, ready to intervene if needed. I was trying to find someone who could help us work through this, and I wasn't sure if insurance would cover it, and I just wanted to. "Derek." I cut him off. "You can't think I believe that. It's the truth." He stepped closer, and I didn't move, but I felt Ava tense. "Sarah, I know I've been a terrible husband. I know I chose Melissa when I should have chosen you. I know that. And I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to show you that I'm serious about fixing it. You're filing for divorce before giving me a real chance," he continued, his voice cracking. "You gave me an ultimatum and 30 days, and I was working on it. I was actually trying to set boundaries with Melissa, and then you just decided we were done without giving me time to prove I could change." I felt something crack in my chest. Was he right? Had I given up too quickly? Had I filed while he was actually trying? No. No, the answer was no. I knew what trying looked like, and this wasn't it. Trying would have been setting those boundaries immediately, not scrambling to do it in the last 12 hours before I left. Trying would have meant putting me first when it mattered. Trying would have been showing up for my miscarriage recovery instead of going to a party. But even knowing that, even being certain that I was making the right choice, I felt the weight of it settle over me like a blanket made of guilt. "I gave you time," I said quietly. "You didn't use it." "I was going to use it. I was waiting until I had a plan, until I could show you that. That's not how this works." My voice was harder now. "I'm not waiting for you to get your act together. I'm not going to stand in our house and watch you promise to do better while you're still letting Melissa waltz through the door whenever she wants. I'm done, Derek. I'm actually, genuinely done." He looked at me like I'd physically struck him, and for a moment I almost faltered. Almost opened the door wider. Almost let him in to discuss it, to argue, to convince me that maybe there was still something to save. Then I thought about the miscarriage. About waking up in the hospital and realizing he wasn't there. About the look on his face when I told him he could have stayed with Melissa. "You need to leave," I said. "Sarah. Leave." Ava's voice came from behind me, sharp as a knife. She said leave. He looked between us, and I saw the moment he realized that arguing wouldn't help. That I had support. That I wasn't going to crumble. "I'll make this easy," he said finally, and his voice was hollow. "You want the house? You can have it. You want the savings account? Take it. But I want you to understand that you're throwing away 3 years of marriage because I wasn't perfect. You're throwing away us because you didn't want to wait for me to get better." "No," I said. "I'm throwing away us because you didn't throw away your sister for me. And you should have." I closed the door before he could respond, and I locked it. Ava put her arm around me, and I stood there shaking, not sure if I'd just made the best decision of my life or the worst one. Chunk 6. The days after Derek left blurred together in a way I hadn't anticipated. I'd expected the aftermath of filing for divorce to feel like relief, like finally putting down something heavy I'd been carrying. Instead, it felt like free fall. Ava had been incredible, letting me stay in her guest room, making sure I ate, sitting with me through the nights when I couldn't sleep. But even her presence couldn't stop the anxiety that crept in around 3 in the morning, whispering questions I wasn't ready to answer. Patricia called on Monday morning. "We need to talk about discovery," she said, which meant I needed to gather all our financial documents, communication records, and anything else that might be relevant. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Going through 3 years of marriage in spreadsheets and email chains felt like dissecting something that used to be alive. That's when I found the credit card statements. I was sitting at Ava's kitchen table with my laptop, pulling up the joint credit card account, when the number stopped making sense. There were charges I'd never seen before. Charges that went back months. Expensive restaurants, a spa weekend in the Poconos, hotel stays. I scrolled through them with my heart pounding, trying to make sense of the timeline. Then I found a name on one of the charges, Greenmont Resort and Spa. The same resort Derek had taken me to for our second anniversary. The charge was dated 3 weeks ago, while I was recovering from my miscarriage. I called Patricia before I could overthink it. "This could be significant," she said carefully, which was lawyer speak for "this changes things." Do you know who these charges were for? No. But they're all from the past 6 months. That's... I trailed off, doing the math. The spa weekend alone was nearly $2,000. The restaurants. The hotels and places we'd never been together. That's a lot of money. Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer carefully. Is there any chance Derek has been having an affair? The question hung in the air like something toxic. My first instinct was to say no, but then I thought about all the times he'd been unavailable. All the emergency calls from his sister that had turned out not to be emergencies. All the nights he'd come home late smelling like cologne that wasn't the one I bought him. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe. Okay. This is actually good news from a legal standpoint, Patricia said, and the clinical tone of her voice somehow made it worse. Infidelity can impact asset division in this state. It strengthens your position. I'm going to file a motion for expedited discovery. We're going to find out exactly what those charges are for. After I hung up, I sat very still. The thing nobody tells you about divorce is that there are layers of betrayal you don't expect. I'd made peace with Derek choosing his sister over me. I'd already grieved that version of our marriage. But the idea that he'd been betraying me in other ways, in ways I hadn't even discovered yet, felt like the ground shifting beneath me all over again. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Hi Sarah, this is Melissa. Derek gave me your number. I think we need to talk. I showed the message to Ava without saying anything. Absolutely not, she said immediately. Do not respond to that. What if she what? Explains how she's not actually the villain in this story? Sarah, no. You're vulnerable right now, and she knows it. That's exactly why she's reaching out. But Melissa was persistent. 3 more texts came through over the next hour. Derek says you're being unreasonable. He loves you. I never asked him to choose between us. This is all a misunderstanding. You're going to regret throwing away your marriage. I hope it was worth it. I blocked the number. Then, on Wednesday morning, Derek's mother called. Her voice was cold in a way it had never been before, and I realized that Derek had already told his family his version of events. In his version, apparently, I was the villain. I was the one who'd given ultimatums. I was the one who'd filed for divorce without trying hard enough to make things work. I don't appreciate you trying to turn my son against his family, she said, not bothering with pleasantries. Melissa is his sister. She's his blood. And you've convinced him that loving her means he doesn't love you, which is manipulative and frankly, quite cruel. I started, but she cut me off. Derek told me about the miscarriage. He told me he should have been there. Do you know how guilty that's made him feel? And now you're using it against him in divorce court. That's despicable. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Ava found me in the kitchen, staring at nothing. What happened? His mother called. She thinks I'm being manipulative. His mother can think whatever she wants. She raised a man who abandoned you in the hospital, Sarah. Her opinion doesn't matter. But it did matter, in the way that the judgment of people who used to feel like family always matters. I'd been married to Derek for 3 years. I'd spent holidays with these people. I'd let them into my life, and now they were closing ranks against me, rewriting the narrative to make Derek the victim. That evening, Patricia emailed me the discovery results. The hotel charges, the spa stays, the expensive dinners, they were all tied to a credit card registered to someone named Catherine Torres. She appeared to be a coworker in Derek's department. I stared at her name for a long time. Derek hadn't just been emotionally unavailable. He'd been unfaithful. While I was recovering from losing our baby, he was taking another woman to expensive hotels. The irony was almost laughable. I'd given him an ultimatum about his sister, and all along he'd been betraying me in a completely different way. All those times I thought he was being emotionally neglectful, he was actually actively choosing someone else. I called Patricia back. File a motion for temporary support, I said. He can pay for his affair out of his own income. As soon as I said it, I felt something shift inside me. Not relief exactly, but clarity. I'd spent 3 years trying to compete with Melissa for Derek's attention, and it turned out he'd been dividing his attention 3 ways the whole time. The marriage hadn't just been broken. It had been a lie. And maybe that was what I needed to finally stop second-guessing myself. Maybe the universe had provided a reason to leave that didn't require any more doubt. #Chunk7. The motion for temporary support was filed on Friday. By Monday, Derek's lawyer had responded with a counterclaim that made Patricia's jaw tighten when she called to brief me. He's alleging that you were emotionally negligent, she said, reading from the document. That you were obsessed with his relationship with his sister to an unhealthy degree. That you isolated him from his family. He's claiming the affair was a symptom of your marital problems, not the cause. I felt something hot and acidic rise in my throat. He's blaming me for his infidelity? That's what he's trying. Look, this is standard tactics. He's throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. But Sarah, I need to be honest with you, this is going to get ugly. He's going to air every grievance, real or imagined, and so are we. Are you prepared for that? I wasn't. Not really. I'd been prepared for the hard conversation, the ultimatum, even the divorce itself. But I hadn't been prepared to have my marriage dissected by strangers, to have my pain weaponized, to see the person I loved describe me as the problem. That evening, my phone rang. Not Derek, but his best friend Marcus, who I'd known since Derek and I started dating. We'd gone to dinners together. Spent holidays together. I thought of Marcus as one of the few good people in Derek's orbit, someone who actually seemed to like me for me. Sarah, I'm calling because I think you should hear this from someone who cares about you, he said, and my stomach dropped at his tone. Derek didn't have an affair. Catherine Torres is his therapist. She recommended the spa weekend because Derek was having a breakdown about the miscarriage. He used his own card for those charges because he didn't want you to find out he was seeing a therapist and think something was wrong with him. The world tilted sideways. He's been having treatment? I asked slowly. For the last 8 months. He's been really struggling with anxiety and depression, and he didn't know how to talk to you about it. The reason he's been distant isn't because he doesn't love you. It's because he's been falling apart and didn't know how to tell you. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe properly. 8 months. That meant all those times he'd been unavailable, all those nights he came home late, the emotional distance I'd been so angry about, he'd been in therapy. He'd been struggling. And instead of telling me, he'd hidden it. Marcus, why didn't he just tell me? Because you were already upset about Melissa, and he didn't want to add to your stress. He thought if you knew he was falling apart, you'd blame his sister for it somehow. He wanted to handle it on his own. After Marcus hung up, I sat in Ava's guest room in the dark. I couldn't turn on the lights. I couldn't move. I'd built an entire narrative around Derek's betrayal, and now parts of it were crumbling. The infidelity charge was exploding into smoke. The affair was therapy, legitimate mental health treatment that he'd been too ashamed or too afraid to tell me about. But he'd still chosen his sister over me. That part was still true. He'd still missed my miscarriage recovery for her birthday. That hadn't changed. Had it? I called Patricia first thing Tuesday morning. The therapist, I said. Does that change anything legally? It changes the infidelity claim. I'm going to recommend we drop it before his lawyer uses it to paint you as someone who violated his privacy by snooping through his medical information. But Sarah, it doesn't change the core issues. He still prioritized his sister. He still didn't communicate with you about his struggles. That's still abandonment. But was it? I realized, with a sick feeling, that I didn't actually know what Derek had been struggling with. I didn't know what his therapist had recommended or why. I didn't know if he'd been having panic attacks or depression or something else entirely. I'd had 3 years to notice something was wrong, and I hadn't noticed anything except that he wasn't giving me enough attention. That same day, Patricia called back. Derek wanted to meet. Not with lawyers present, just him and me. I wouldn't recommend it, she said. Anything you say could be used against you. But what if he wants to explain? Then he can explain through his lawyer. I ignored her advice. We met at the coffee shop near our house, the one where we'd had our first date, which felt either like cruel irony or a sign that he was trying. Derek looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. There were shadows under his eyes that made him look hollow. I'm not trying to make excuses, he said immediately, but I need you to understand what was happening with me. The anxiety started about a year ago. It was small at first, just trouble sleeping. But it got worse after your parents' funeral. Watching you grieve them, it made me realize how fragile everything is, and I couldn't stop thinking about losing people. Losing you. It spiraled. My therapist said I was developing agoraphobic tendencies and that I was using Melissa as a security blanket because she made me feel safe. Why didn't you tell me? My voice came out smaller than I intended. Because I was ashamed. I'm supposed to be the strong one. The one who takes care of you. And instead I was falling apart. And when you started getting upset about Melissa, I panicked because I couldn't give her up. She was the only thing keeping me functional. And I know that's not fair to you. My therapist told me it wasn't fair. But I was barely holding it together. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to hold on to the narrative I'd constructed of Derek as emotionally negligent and selfish. But what he was describing sounded less like choice and more like drowning. The miscarriage, I said. You still missed that. I know. And I'll never forgive myself. I was having a panic attack that night, a bad one, and my therapist had told me to call Melissa when I felt like I was spiraling because she was my anchor. So I did. And by the time I realized I should be with you instead, it was too late. You were already at the hospital. You were already losing the baby. He was crying now, quietly, and I realized I had no idea how to feel about any of this. I'd filed for divorce based on a husband I thought I understood. But I'd been married to a stranger all along. What do you want from me? I asked. I want to try again. With a couples therapist. Someone who can help us actually communicate instead of me just being broken in silence and you just being angry at things I wasn't even doing consciously. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Because for the first time since I'd issued that ultimatum, I wasn't sure I'd done the right thing. #Chunk8. I sat with that uncertainty for 3 days. 3 days of not answering Derek's calls. 3 days of Ava asking if I wanted to talk about it while I pretended to sleep on her couch. 3 days of Patricia leaving increasingly frustrated voicemails about the divorce proceedings and the need to make decisions about the house, the accounts, the timeline. 3 days of realizing that my certainty, the thing that had felt so righteous and necessary when I'd issued that ultimatum, had been built on incomplete information. On the 4th day, I called Patricia and asked her to pause everything. You're not thinking clearly, she warned me. This is what manipulators do. They rewrite the narrative, Anne. He's not manipulating me, I said quietly. He's just been sick and didn't tell me. And I didn't notice because I was too busy being angry. Sarah, you still have legitimate grievances. The boundary issues with his sister didn't start because of his anxiety. They started because he never learned to say no to her. She was right about that. And that's what made this so complicated. Because Derek had been honest with me at that coffee shop, genuinely, painfully honest. He'd admitted that his dependency on Melissa was unhealthy. He'd acknowledged that using her as a crutch instead of telling me he was struggling was wrong. He hadn't tried to excuse it so much as explain it, and there was a difference. An important one. But explaining wasn't the same as fixing. I called Dr. Catherine Torres's office and asked if she had any couples therapist recommendations. The receptionist, not the doctor herself, gave me 3 names. I called each one. 2 weren't taking new patients. The third, Dr. Reeves, had an opening in 2 weeks. Then I called Derek. I'm not dropping the divorce, I said before he could speak. I need you to understand that. But I want to try therapy first. Real therapy. With both of us. And Derek, if we do this, you have to actually do the work. You can't just show up and talk about your feelings. You have to change. You have to set boundaries with Melissa. You have to tell me when you're struggling instead of disappearing into your own head. You have to choose us. I will, he said. I promise I will. Don't promise, I said. Just do it. I moved back into the house that weekend. Not because I was suddenly fine. Not because one conversation had erased 3 years of feeling invisible. but because I needed to see if Derek meant what he'd said. And I couldn't do that from Ava's guest room. The first thing he did was call Melissa. I wasn't in the room, I gave him privacy for it, but I could hear his voice through the closed door of his office, steady and calm. No, Melissa, I can't help you move next weekend. I have therapy with Sarah and me. Yes, actually, I do have plans before that. Plans that matter. No, you can't stay here. We talked about this. I understand you're upset, but that's not my responsibility to fix. When he came out, he looked exhausted. How'd it go? I asked. She called me selfish. Said I was choosing you over my family. Are you okay? No, he admitted. But I think it's the right thing. That became the pattern of the next 2 weeks. Derek would set a boundary with Melissa, and Melissa would escalate her response. She sent him angry texts. She called our house and tried to talk to me. She even showed up at his office, which got him called into his manager's office for workplace concern. But he didn't cave. When our first couples therapy session arrived, I was terrified. Dr. Reeves was a woman in her 50s with gray streaked hair and an office that smelled like lavender. She didn't coddle us or take sides. She just asked questions. Sarah, when did you first feel unseen in this marriage? After my parents died. Derek shut down emotionally, and I needed him, and he wasn't there. Derek, is that how you remember it? No, he said quietly. I was there physically. But I was having a breakdown and didn't have the language to ask for help. And when Sarah started needing me, I felt like I was failing, so I withdrew more. Do you see how that created a cycle? Dr. Reeves asked. Each of you needed something from the other, and neither of you could ask for it. Sarah, you needed emotional support. Derek, you needed understanding that you were struggling. Instead, you both just shut down. Over the next 4 weeks, we kept showing up. Derek went to his individual therapy twice a week. I started seeing Dr. Reeves on my own once a week to work through my grief, not just about my parents, but about the miscarriage, about the person I thought my husband was, about all the versions of myself I'd abandoned while trying to keep our marriage afloat. It wasn't a fairy tale. Some days Derek would slip back into old patterns of emotional distance. Some days I would feel angry all over again at the time I'd lost, at the baby we'd lost, at the years I'd spent fighting for his attention. But he kept showing up. And slowly, incrementally, things began to shift. Derek started telling me when he was feeling anxious. Not vaguely, but specifically. I'm having intrusive thoughts about losing you became a conversation instead of him disappearing. When Melissa called with a crisis, he would tell me about it instead of just vanishing to help her. I, in turn, started asking about his feelings instead of assuming I knew what they were. I learned that some of his distance during my grief hadn't been rejection, it was his own terror that he was inadequate, that he couldn't save me or protect me from pain. 6 weeks into therapy, during one of our sessions, Dr. Reeves asked the question that changed everything. Do you both want to stay married? I looked at Derek. He looked at me. And for the first time in months, I could see him clearly, not the version I'd constructed, not the version I'd been angry at, but the actual, flawed, struggling, trying human being I'd married. Yes, I said. Yes, he said at the same time. Then you need to understand something, Dr. Reeves said gently. Staying married means forgiving each other. Not forgetting what happened. But actively choosing to move forward instead of holding on to the hurt. I don't know if I can do that, I said. You can, she said. But only if you decide to. Only if you choose him, even knowing what you know now. Even knowing that he'll struggle, that you'll struggle, that this marriage will never be perfect. I thought about the ultimatum I'd given. The divorce papers I'd filed. The moment I'd decided that choosing myself meant leaving. But maybe choosing myself didn't have to mean that. Maybe it meant choosing myself enough to stay, but only if the marriage changed. Only if Derek changed. Only if I changed. I want to withdraw the divorce filing, I told Patricia the next day. Are you sure? She asked carefully. No, I admitted. But I'm willing to try.